Hello, everybody out there. Welcome to Through a Therapist's Eyes. We love that you've joined us for another episode where we are going to talk about, Neil, you might have to help me out because I've made jokes about it and I've screwed up the title multiple times, so help me out. What are we talking about today?
Management of stress and life issues.
Yeah. So this is actually going to be a different little bit of an episode. We're going to be talking about the topic in the context of what we've been doing this week. We've been doing some professional speaking engagements. They're really just all stacked up together. I knew this was several months ago when we booked them and planned them, so more on that in a little bit. But this is where you get to get personal insights from a therapist in your own home or car, being aware this is not the delivery of therapy services in any way, and we appreciate you helping us out. 5-star reviews. Apple iTunes lets you give reviews, not just 5 stars, but you subscribe to the various platform. Same thing with YouTube. YouTube allows you to give good feedback. Really thank you for listening to the show with us and staying with us this long. We've had people I've heard online, they've kind of interacted that they've listened kind of from the beginning. So it's been a fun journey, it really has, and I really appreciate you doing that. Help us broaden our scope, do those stars and things. Contact at throughatherapisteyes.com is another way to give us questions and interaction. We sometimes put those on the air, do some fun stuff with people that say things that make me think things I've never thought before. That's what happens.
Yes.
And so that's a lot of fun to do. So guys, as always, this is the human emotional experience, and we endeavor to figure that out together. I've been talking more about why I say that. I don't know why. It's just been coming up more and more. But that's what I think we do in therapy. We figure things out together. And, no one's the expert on an individual person inside themselves than themselves. I'm doing nothing more than facilitating a dynamic process that I think we talked about a lot last week, didn't we?
Yes, with Melissa. That was a good conversation between two experienced therapists.
She really has a lot of experience. I think she got me beat by a year.
1 year.
1 year. That's awesome. So I'm going to do a current event this time to start out with. And this actually came from a therapy session today. And it was a new term. So I don't know if this is in the news per se or not, but Neil, have you ever heard of something called neurodiversity?
I know of the term. I've heard of the term. What exactly it is, I don't know.
Who knows what it is? I looked it up. I got definitions written down. Neurodivergent. Oh, I didn't copy the definition of the daggone thing. Yeah, you go for your phone. Well, the definition of neurodivergent was really simple. Neurodiversity, though, listen to what they kind of put it as. Differing in mental health or neurological functioning from what is considered typical or normal, frequently used with reference to autism spectrum disorder, not neurotypical. Neurodiversity describes the idea that people experience and interact with the world around them in many ways different. There is no one right way of thinking, learning, and behaving, and differences are not viewed as deficits. They have that underlined in this article. The word neurodiversity refers to a diversity of all people, but it is often used... Oh, I repeated it. Must have copied twice. I just screwed my typing up. The neurodiversity movement emerged during the 1990s, aiming to increase acceptance and inclusion of all people while embracing neurological differences. Through online platforms, more and more autistic people were able to connect and form a self-advocacy movement, and it goes on to kind of describe, how this thing got started and all. So, did you look at neurodivergent, the definition?
Neurodiversity?
Yeah, neurodivergent.
You want neurodivergent or neurodiversity?
Neurodivergent.
That's the definition you had.
It is similar. I thought it was similar, but I had something different.
No, I got the same thing you got. So
it was interesting conversation that we had in session, and kind of a younger generation thing. It seems like I don't want to poke too much holes in this, but I chose to use it as a current event because of what I've seen over the years, where people are beginning to pull from the psychological field, from the mental health and substance abuse world, these terms and these things that seem cool, I guess, but get kind of twisted in not having an understanding. And so I thought it'd be cool from my perspective as a therapist, sort of weighing in on what this is. Now, by no means do I want to piss anybody off and make fun of the diversity component. We are all different people, and there's been lots of movements to kind of bring those things out. In the political world, we've got, what are they calling it? My brain's just farting. Culture wars, right? The abortion things in the news. Boy, I probably should have done a current event on that. That's a significant thing.
There's a lot of stuff with that.
Yeah. Boy, that's a big current event. I probably should have done that instead, but I just chose. I literally just thought of that. But these culture wars that are going on, these things that people are arguing about, I don't really understand why we have to argue and fight so much about them. And we develop a term like neurodiversity. It seems a bit silly to me, really. And like I said, I don't want to piss anybody off. People that, Autism Speaks is an amazing organization, and they are being able to get a lot of myths and stereotypes driven out, because autistic people, particularly on the mild variety, you might not ever really even realize they're autistic. That's why I like to use the word Asperger's still. You've heard me talk about that before.
Yeah.
So I'm going to come out of my shell a little bit, like I do on this show. And I'm going to demonstrate the fact that I really feel like I have a learning disability. Sounds crazy? Maybe not. The joke in the family is Mom wanted to have bourbon and chocolate while she was pregnant with me. I guess that's probably true, and that's probably the root of all my ails. Maybe I have ADD components. I think more what happens for me is that I struggled as a kid in school until I figured out how to work hard, is memory. Like, oddly enough, I could not, until way developmentally after I should, be able to name the months in the row, right? January, February, March, April, May, June, July, so on. Like, I could not do that. If you started me out in June, I would be like, June, what comes next? July, August. I could do it now. Still to this day, and I'm curious, do you know which one's coming up, actually? Memorial Day or Labor Day? I think it's Memorial Day. Okay, that's coming up. I couldn't tell you right now what month Labor Day is in. Can you?
Yeah.
Yeah. What month is it?
It's September.
Okay. I wouldn't have a chance at that. So I couldn't tell you the months until, again, developmentally after I should be able to, when holidays are. Always got Christmas, December probably, because every kid knows that.
4th of July seems pretty obvious.
Yeah, good point. Good point. So there's things like this, remembering people's names and being organized in memory-based stuff I struggle with. And I'm not sure that I have a learning disability or not. But that would make me neurodivergent. You see?
Mm-hmm.
You see? And I don't know that we need to highlight that level of sort of difference, because my main point here with this current event and this term that I literally haven't heard that before, neurodiversity. We really are so dynamic as individuals that we think very differently, probably uniquely to a person. And so I think we can go a little too far with, some of the advocacy things to some extent. And this, to me, feels like a little bit of an example. I'm sure I'll get emails on it. I don't know.
You might. But I think you hit on the head. We're so different. The neurodivergent seems like a redundant statement on human nature,
That's a great way to put what I was thinking. It's redundant.
Because I think that's, you say you might have a learning disability, but maybe it's just how you process things,
Right?
So, sometimes some people try too hard to make it a diagnosis versus just, I'm just not good at that sometimes.
Right.
And I do think there are components where you're on the higher side. They have biologically, genetically, there's something definitely that needs to be addressed. Most people, it's like, that's just who you are. That's just how you do. And so
we battle for self-acceptance internally, which is also pretty universal. And I think that's what we're trying to tap into, just thinking about this current event when we're kind of doing some of these advocacy things. Can we really accept ourselves and the reality that we're different? Because that's intimidating. And I don't know that we need a term for that. I think we need to reconcile even the abandonment engulfment thing that we talk about on the show a lot, in close attachments. That's a very different way of thinking. Does that mean that pretty much universally husbands and wives, depending upon what side you are neurodivergent from each other? I guess we could say that. I think we're going to say we think differently and that needs to be respected and understood, not demoralized or demeaned, and worked with. It's a management issue. See how I did that?
Nice.
Management issue. What's the topic again today?
Management of stress and life issues.
Yeah. So the idea with this show in managing stress and life issues, it comes really from the activities that we've been doing with public speaking. So why don't you break down what we've been doing so people understand what we're talking about? Give me a break.
You mean what I've been having to do for the last couple when are we going to have a show on procrastination? Because I feel like I need that one.
Oh, well, that would be a good one. That would be a good one.
But no, I really, because I know you did one presentation before on the methodical management,
right,
process. And so I missed that one, but then I've been part of the last two. And what I really have enjoyed about the last two is the fact that the foundation of this course that you're talking about with the methodical management, it's very diverse in the different people we talk to, even the one we're going to be doing at the end of the month. You can really tweak it and adjust it to really fit any organization, any type of situation, because it's so universal. But there's all these different things that you have to manage. You talked about isolations, we've talked about caregivers, we've talked about all these things. And that's the coolest thing, that this management of your life and yourself, it applies to everyone, no matter what your neurodiversity is.
Nice.
And it's been kind of fun watching it, kind of fun watching the reactions the last couple of days. So that's been neat. And so, that's kind of the biggest thing that we've been doing. And, seeing that, putting this information together, seeing how it, affects certain people, seeing the reactions of the people in the crowd, that one person that got brought up that had that event happen to her this last year.
I know.
That was kind of crazy.
That was huge.
And that's the cool stuff with these presentations. When you do these in front of so many different people and you find those interactions, it's so fun to get those connections.
I love it.
It was great. So like I said, at first I wasn't sure, but I really enjoyed the last two we've done. We just need to space them out better instead of back-to-back days.
Well, I think it'll be, it's been a busy week in that regard. So I'm allowed to do a little self-promotion, I think, on this show. I kind of try to promote the guest co-hosts and the different things. So I'm going to take a stab at it now. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, definitely.
So you too can have, through a therapist's eyes, Chris Gazdick come and speak to you and your organization. Yeah. Right? And seriously, actually, that is a part of the platform that I've always dreamed and have been building. I developed a presentation called the Methodical Management of Mental Health. Interestingly, people have renamed it, I guess, if you picked up on how they've been renaming.
Yeah, they've taken some creative liberties with your titles.
Yeah, and if you have an organization out there, I'm pretty easy to work with. I don't worry about that sort of stuff. But I really do enjoy enthusiastically talking about mental health, and this is a really cool presentation that is a professional speaking product. I designed it as a keynote speech that I've been doing at smaller levels, for a little while to get it really honed and really grinding into what I want it to be. And it's getting into a really good place. And that is what we delivered 2 times this last week to 2 different groups and organizations. And I think it went really well. You can actually Google the Methodical Management of Mental Health, and you'll find the links, I think. The one that I did a while ago with Centralina, or Centralina, whatever their name is. I think I pronounced it correctly the second time. It comes up, and it's on a YouTube link. So you can check it out. It's a pretty neat put together on the topic that we have tonight. And we actually did this one time under a different title, and so it isn't really content regurgitated. It's been really content that's been development. Because the genesis of that particular show, or actually the genesis to a certain extent of this product, of the professional speaking engagement, came from a show that we did. Because I always would say, look, I don't spend a lot of time with one of the most important things that people want, when they come to therapy. I want skills. I want coping mechanisms. I want to know some strategies. I hear that all the time. And I would often say to people in my personal life, sometimes in my office as well too, you know what? You can Google that stuff. And you remember what happened when I tried to Google it?
You said you didn't find anything.
There wasn't hardly anything out there. I was shocked. I was kind of like, oh my gosh. Well, you get these articles that come up and you get these things that people talk about in emotion management. And that's, understandable. But they would stop at a list of like 10 or 5 or something like that. And I'm like, dude, there's so much more than that. So I really have, you can see on the live feeds here, this is the tools list. And right now, I think we stopped at 49 different specific things. And I want to go through them today because I think they're really helpful to understand what the heck do we do. This episode answers a number one question of skills and management techniques in mental health. And so we're gonna kind of go down through that today. So
I think we can build on that, and I think there's a lot of stuff we can do. I was thinking about that, like adding more to that, more information to that, maybe elaborate on each one of those, and really giving them a real good resource for them.
That's yeah. What would we do with that? That would be a strong resource. Some of them you need explanations a little
right,
bit.
because I mean, you have you talked about your Tomb of the Unknown, which was kind of cool. But yeah, some of those it's like, they're obvious, But some of them are like, maybe we need just a couple sentences. And so maybe I'll do that and just start writing those up. And it'll just be more pages on this tools list for people to get. Maybe.
That is, yeah, I like that. And, I don't know. This is a random thought, but when you talk about life management issues, it's funny in my mastermind group. What just came up for me was a bit of content that we had this last week. Was about a marshmallow challenge that this person created. And to make a long story short, what they found is that they put these groups of people together, like entrepreneurial minded folks and CEO folks and, different groups. They even did kids. And the challenge is they get like 18 minutes and they get like 15 pieces of spaghetti. They get such a thick roll of tape and then a marshmallow. And so the marshmallow has to be on top of a structure that you built. And the challenge is how high you can make this structure from the ground up. And it comes with some interesting results. They found that the kids actually did way better than even CEOs alone.
That lack of structure or preconceived notions just as a creativity.
Yes. And it was about the way that groups work together. So there's power structures that they wwere studying. They did a lot from this. There's actually a YouTube TEDx that you could check out. You probably can type in marshmallow challenge and you'll see a TED Talk come up. And the biggest piece there that I wanted to highlight that just popped in my head in what we're doing with developing this presentation and just doing things. So when you have life issues, this is one of the first takeaways really today. Go take actions. Like do prototypes. Kids did such a good job because they just tried stuff. I mean, they didn't worry about who was in charge and whose idea was better and getting the right formulation that, people do in our adult brain. They just developing on each trial and error new ideas and shaped it until they got to the place at the end of the 18 minutes where they had a pretty daggum good structure. And I find that people really, when they're dealing with life issues, get afraid in the beginning of trying to do something and then get stuck and then don't take anything. You talk about procrastination.
Mm-hmm.
We think about something, and then we think of a new angle of it, and then we worry about something that might come of it, and then we see a negative outcome, and then we see a really cool idea, and we try to bond it together. We do so much head work. It can be maddening.
Yep.
Instead of like, I don't know, let me just take this paragraph that I wrote, and let me take this idea, and let me just journal on this a little bit, meditate a little bit, write a little bit more. You know what you have? A book. Right?
Oh, I didn't tell you this. My youngest and his girlfriend have challenged themselves to write a 50,000 word novel.
50,000 word novel.
Yes.
Wow. You know what? I bet they get that done.
I don't know where he is now. He's at a few thousand words right now. So, but I just think it's cool that these two teenage kids have challenged themselves to write this, and it's a cool situation. But it goes back. They challenged and then they started, and they're doing it.
It does go back to that. And they are younger. They're fearless. They're not hung up on what people are going to think so much. They're just taking an interest and going with it. And so, boy, if you can figure that out with stress and life management, with issues that come on in your marriage, trying new parent strategies, you're constantly prototyping a parent strategy. Mm-hmm. And then they grow up and you finally figure it out when they're gone. But that's okay because you've constantly along the way tried things. Just try. Take a step. I love what they say at my church that I have been a poor attender to lately through the pandemic. Working with you towards your next step in your journey. That's their tagline, and it's awesome. That's what coaching does. We talked about that 2 weeks ago with Craig. Mm-hmm. It's about what step do you want to do? I don't know. I feel like I'm on a soapbox. But I say every day in therapy when I meet somebody new, how was your life like? How do you want your life to be like? That's what we're trying to get to. It's good stuff.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting, like the tools list that's created, I mean, I guarantee most people, there's probably at least a dozen, if not more, of things that's like, I never thought about that. And I think what's cool about resources like that is go try it and see what works for you. You know, one of the things I got from you in the last two presentations is you're not a meditation guy.
I am not.
But there's a lot of people that's their bread and butter. They love it. But you do deep breathing and it works for you. And I think that's the key, like you said, is when you're dealing with situations in your life, knowing your options, and like you said, that's what coaches give, that's what therapists give you. They say, hey, try this. Here's some things in my experience that can help you. But having those resources to try it, and then you see what works and what doesn't work, and then, well, it doesn't work, try the next thing, and try the next. And I think that's what's nice about these tool lists and these types of things is because you see, oh, well, just check the box. Oh, tried it. Yes, no, it worked, whatever. And like you said, that's how the kids did. They tried all these different things. What worked, what didn't work, and they came up with the right solution for them to say,
what feels good for me. But I do want to lay a little bit of caution out there in what you're saying, in to a certain extent. You also don't want to hop around too much, right? Because we're going to go through, we're going to come on this tools list of 50 things almost that you can manage, but you want to dial in a little bit. So when you feel one that just doesn't fit or work, okay, abandon that one pretty quickly. Yeah. It's not your jam. But when you find one, it's like, oh, well, that kind of helped, but not so much. Understand. And so I'm getting way ahead of what the presentation's order is, but that's okay because we can do anything on the show, right?
We don't have show notes today.
We don't even have show notes. I know it was awesome doing show prep yesterday because this has been prepped for like 5 years. But you've got to understand when you develop a new skill, it takes time and framing and learning. That's probably another takeaway today, insofar as you have got to be able to give yourself some grace, take some patience into the equation, and then learn. You think you know how to do deep breathing? Good Lord, talk to Craig. He'll tell you a heck of a lot more, right?
We've done that box breathing with our kids, and it's like that first time. I was like, okay, 3 times we're done. Yeah. It's like, and he does it for 20 minutes. I'm like,
20 minutes.
Like, how do you even do that?
And Craig will tell you all about the science that goes into your sinuses and what happens with oxygen and the chemical relays and why it's better to breathe through your nose and breathe through your mouth. You know, my neighbor, hey, Kevin, give him another shout out. He enjoys that. You know, he was like amazed at, you know, how the breathing needed to be relearned. So I could spend probably 3 hours with Craig talking about that, and that's one of the things that I enjoy when I'm stressed out is taking those deep breaths. I could learn so much. I have learned so much from him because we did it on the show. Mm-hmm. So try different ones, do different ones, move around a little bit. But when you find a little bit of a spark, I want you to really lay into it.
Stick with it, because I think sometimes you don't realize how beneficial it is until you do it a little bit, and then you stop, and then you realize, wait,
Good point too.
Because sometimes it is gradual, but then once you get to that little bit of, it's kind of like working out. You go work out, and you're like, oh, I'm so dying, and then you like go a little bit, and then you go back to that first workout, and you're like, oh, that was easy. Yeah,
it does progressively improve your ability to manage life stress. Mm-hmm. That's a great line. Using these life skills progressively improves your ability to manage life stress. Maybe that's on a coffee cup. So let's get to it a little bit. So this is actually, like I said, from the professional speaking engagement, the Methodical Management of Mental Health, that just contact us. Contact it through therapisteyes.com is a great way. And I'd love to come speak to your company. I'd love to come speak to your group. I don't care how big it is or small it is. This is something that really can benefit people. I have been lazy about getting to book clubs, but if you have a book club out there, I'd love to zoom in with you and have some books available for you and go through some of this stuff. So there are 3 major steps that we go in with this. So step 1 is identifying emotion. Okay? Real simple. And then step 2 is executing a skill. And then step 3 is going to be practicing that skill. So we talked a little bit about the practicing part. Identifying emotion is a really important part of what we want to be able to do with a lot of this stuff. And I spend a good bit of time on this first one when I'm talking to a group because I feel like it's one of the most important one, actually. There are so many people that go through life, and I'll do it now. I highlight a chapter of my book in this professional engagement that I do with groups to help people realize the fallacy in thinking that I don't really have emotion. So the chapter actually starts out this way. It says, listen, the expression's right out from this chapter. I am just not an emotional person. Okay? Stuff just doesn't bother me as it does you. Right? Dang, that guy has ice in his veins, like the sports quarterback, right? Ice in his veins. Nothing seems to bother him. I've never seen them upset. Some people will say, I've never seen my parent cry. I'm not a sensitive person. I just let stuff roll off my back, man. And my personal favorite, how are you? I'm fine. It's like, what do these phrases, and I'm sure that you listening in the audience have said some of these things. You may have heard these come out of your mouth. I think many of us have made these statements. Are these statements at all indicative of what kind of emotion we're experiencing? No. I love to make the point that, and I don't like always, forever, those types of words, but 100% of the time during every single day, even when you're sleeping, you're actually emotionally experiencing it. Even when you're dreaming. Now, you can argue neurologically with me about deep sleep stage 5 when you're not dreaming. I think your subconscious is still pretty active. And I think your brain is always on alert. You hear a noise, boom. What does your body do? It knows there's a reason to be alarmed, and you wake up.
Well, it goes back to new parents when the baby cries.
Oh, yes. Go further. Yeah,
it's just that, because I was always a heavy sleeper. And it's funny because with my first kid, I didn't affect me that much. But with the second kid, for some reason, it really did. Like I would wake up more with the second kid than the first, which is weird. But yeah, so as your body gets, that subconscious knows that, I have more responsibilities, I have this going on, so it changes how you respond to it. Like now, when I first met my wife and we got married, I would sleep through all my alarms.
Oh wow.
Drove her nuts. She was surprised we're still married.
Please get up and do something.
But now, like with my alarm, I get up almost instantly. I turn it off. Sometimes, a lot of times, I go back to bed, but I turn it off. And so that's that shift in that person, that thought process and how I sleep and what triggers me out of my sleep than what I used to. Mm-hmm. And so that's definitely I definitely agree with the fact that sometimes I do sleep really hard and you can't wake me up. But for the most part, there's certain noises and certain things that still trigger me as a parent now because of what I've been conditioned. So just imagine being an athlete, having to get up at 4 o'clock to do your swim practice. And
your body knows.
Yeah, exactly.
Your body knows. It's really funny. I had a client one time who was telling me about this. Could have been a friend. I think it was clients when we were just rapping one day, probably before the session really began. And he told me how his buddies were tormenting his newly delivered, his wife who had recently delivered a baby. And there's this biological response that when you hear crying, a woman who's breastfeeding will begin to what do you call it? Lactate, right? And so they were tormenting her with a car ride, crying out loud and just driving her nuts. It was so terrible. But the thing is your psychology is always on point. It's always in action. It's always active. And I think it's absolutely true. So there isn't any one Now, we process emotion differently. So when we're managing stress, now we're on a different level. Mm-hmm. Now we're neurodivergent, right? We're all expressing things differently, experiencing things differently, processing things differently, thinking through things differently, like those. Now we've got a lot of variation. Okay. So let's make this even more complicated. Do you have emotion? You have emotion at any one point. I'm not sure if we can say, is there any one point that you really only are experiencing one emotion? So you heard me talk about that yesterday, right? Adding a new question to that. Do you think we ever really experience only one? Weird, isn't it?
That is kind of an odd question when you think about it.
I think so. I think I'm going to maintain no. Like, the emotional layers that we have cannot, it's a true fact that you can think 7 thoughts for only being able to speak one. So when you're in an experience, there's all this stuff moving around. You can't even possibly fit words on it because you're in it. It's going on in the background in your psyche. So it stands to reason if you're really identifying sadness, you got other things probably a part of that. I think the example I was going on yesterday, right? What sadness, and then you get to worrying about what you're upsetting the other person with, and then you become confused. Remember how I did that? Mm-hmm. It was a bit schizophrenic, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It's high energy, but that's what our emotional systems are doing. So not only are you emotional all the time, you're emotional all the time with multiple emotions. And so we want to manage stress and life issues by really paying attention and identifying, what it is that we're experiencing. Now, there's another part that I go in with this identifying emotion that I think is really important. I think I talked about it on the show before, though. Neil, help me out so I don't spend time on something we recently did. Did I talk about my reframe on here of digging deep and going at the root of the problem, that line of discussion? Did I do that on the show? I really can't remember.
It doesn't sound familiar.
It does not.
It does not, I don't think. Probably as soon as you start talking about it, oh yeah.
Well, we talked about it on the show, in the presentations. Okay, this was a reframe. When you talk about identifying emotion, this is a really cool area when you're managing stress. People are terrified, really, if you really think about it. Like, I'd rather numb out. I'd really rather not be emotional. I just want to kind of chill right now. Well, they might switch that around when something's on their mind. Maybe it's dealing with a terrible financial crisis, or maybe you're in the war sector over in Ukraine right now and you're worried in Poland that they're going to attack you. Whatever it might be, right? The thought here is that I really got to dig deep. I got to get my emotions together. I really need to go at the root of this thing. I need to excavate down to the foundational level of myself, and then that way know better what I'm experiencing. And I reframe that. I don't think you have to do that at all.
Actually, we did talk about that with Melissa last week.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, I'm like, because I knew as soon as you guys were talking about that's what the job of the therapist is, to dig down and do that stuff. Okay.
Apologize for that, guys. That there's been a lot of things blending together for me. It's been a very busy week, so thank you for stopping me from going.
So if you want more
further
details on that, check out last episode.
Absolutely. It's a big reframe, isn't it? Mm-hmm. To just finish this up, if you're catching this so isolating of yourself, of this show, instead of doing all of that stuff, what I figured out, honestly, a few years ago, I reframed that to stop spending all that energy on doing that and just allow things to rise to the surface. Way less energy, way less effort, way less work, actually. The work then comes in when stuff rises. Now we got to manage that. So that's still a suck part. That's still a very big challenge. But it's a whole lot easier than trying to think about doing all that work to even get to it.
It's easier to manage what appears versus trying to go through and redo everything.
Which is another point, as you say that, that's why I love having these conversations, right? You'll dig down and think you're getting at the foundation, come to find you've totally dug horizontal and went to a totally different place. And I think that's probably true because there's so much down there.
Mm-hmm.
The important stuff comes to the surface at any given moment when you're working on a trouble with a big decision on what school to go to for your career. Well, at that point, that's what you're focused on. Whatever's important there will rise up. And so that's a great skill set when managing life stress. Understand, you're in the middle of whatever's stressing you out now. You don't have to do a lot of work to get at it. Just allow it to present itself. And if you miss it, by the way, it'll re-present itself. It'll keep on bubbling up and bubbling up.
And in software, some of the companies I've worked with, some companies don't keep what's called a feature request list because when the users use their stuff, they'll have like a list of like 500 things that they want to, add this, and this. And one company I talked to when looking at development, that's like, we don't keep those because what we see is if the customers really want it, we'll keep seeing the same requests come in. Yep. So instead of trying to get at everything, they handle the stuff that comes up. And so I think like looking at your list, journaling, if something keeps coming up in your journal, well, you just need to really address that.
It must be important.
Yeah.
It must be important because it keeps on coming out. And to young therapists out there that might be listening to the show here, right? Like there's a fear, I might miss a really important clinical issue. I got to be on my game. I got to know my stuff. Actually, you really don't. You really don't. If you have a 4 or 5 month long therapy relationship and somebody's coming in for, let's just say, being depressed and or grieving a loss, and it's going to come up and you miss it. It's going to come up and you miss it 3 or 4, 5, maybe 6 times, and you'll be like, oh my gosh, this grief is complicated because you actually have a depression condition. It'll come back up. You'll catch it. So you really don't have to worry about it. I learned that well into my therapy practice because I fell into that trap myself. Like, I got to know all this stuff. You really don't because the person will stick around long enough. You almost can't miss important things is what I'm trying to say. If you don't know how you feel about something and you stop compressing something, can we say the fact that it will present itself? You will be able to find it and see it if you allow it to be present. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Another quick thing with this identifying emotion that I go through in this presentation talk is a challenge to you. So I will give you a challenge to the listening audience today. You do a basic greeting, right? Hey, how you doing, Neil?
Good. How are you?
Oh, good. How are you? That's it. Right? I want to challenge you to begin to engage. I'm going to test you. I'll put you on the spot. Engage like we talked about in the chat at the talks the last couple of days. See how he does, guys. Again, tip. We want to allow our emotion to be known. We want to allow our information to be seen. Couple, 2, 3 sentences. Hey, Neil, how you doing, man?
It could be better. Found a lot of snakes in my yard today. Made me a little nervous, a little freaked out.
Is that true?
Yeah, we really didn't freak me out that much, but some of the black snakes have come back and they've kind of surprised us being at different parts of our yard that we weren't expecting. So yeah, it startled us a little bit.
Let's just pause right there. Doesn't that give us a lot more information in a mundane way? We're not going very deep. We're not really saying very much, but it is a response to the question. And I know we have greetings and we just kind of say, I'm fine, and we move along our way because we're busy. So I'm not talking about that. But with people that you see every day, I come in here to DW and she asks me the question, hey, good morning, how are you? I will give her a response like that. And it takes nothing more than 10 to 15 seconds and we move along to my first appointment for the day. right? But we just learned there's some interesting things going on at Neil's house, and there was some angst, and there's snakes. And if we had time to commiserate, we could go back and forth and have fun connecting for maybe a minute. We're talking about water cooler conversations now. So, but the greeting is identifying emotion, which is a huge step in understanding the stress that you have for the day. Be genuine about that. So the challenge is the very next time you get that question, hey, how you doing? Or, hey, how'd your day go? I'm asking you to do a 3-sentence max, but give at least a sentence, 2 or 3 in response to that question. You may get it when you get home from the car ride that you're currently on right now. So that's your challenge. Right? Sound cool?
And I think what's cool about that is that could open up a whole nother floodgate of conversation with those relationships you talked about. It's the start of a conversation. It could also be a way that whatever's bothering you, good or bad, that could open up it could be at the surface that you can now address it. So without that fear, that angst of like, oh my God, I got to deal with my issues, just talk about it. And maybe that thing you haven't been able to sleep about for the last 4 nights,
literally.
now you've just said it. Oh, well, now you can address it and get over with,
And particularly when you go into an involved type of thing, it needs to be somebody that you have the level of trust with. So please don't understand we're just talking about strangers on the street.
Yeah. Don't do that with the cashier at your local Target or something.
Right.
You're like, I don't get paid enough for this.
Yeah. but with people that are in your life, man, they care.
Mm-hmm.
And you're allowing yourself that little opening, you might do yourself a massive amount of good and then go home and sleep the whole night through. So let's go to the second of the 3. Execute a skill. This is where it gets fun, right? And this is answering the question of all the things that we have, and here's my list. I think I'm just going to go down through it, and then we can kick around with it. Oops, sorry about that. Somebody's trying to text me. So here's the list. You too can hear me come speak to your agency. That's self-promotion getting annoying.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet. So far, so good.
Contact at throughatherapisteyes.com for the methodical management of mental health. Here's the bones of it. Break things down into small pieces. Self-meditate. Study faith tradition texts. Self-care. Review self-help material. Breathing. Journaling. Exercise, a walk or a run, etc. Talk to and use of friendship. A 1, 5, and 10-year plan development. Mindfulness of nutrition. Have a pet. I like to pause here now because I bring my pet to therapy on Wednesdays. Although the novelty's kind of worn off and I've gotten away from it. That's bad. Sadie loves being here. She's a cute little Yorkie Maltese mix, and she just greets people so nicely, and they just love it. But I do digress. Have a pet. That's a management tool of emotion, right? Mm-hmm. Visualization, tension release meditation, sensory answers to panic feelings. We actually did a whole show on panic disorder, and we dive deep on how to get yourself out of a panic attack, right? We did that very early on in our show.
You did it recently, I think, with
did we redo
Casey recovered it or talked about it
again
about anxiety. Yeah. You went through the whole practice, which was really cool.
Yeah. Meridian tapping, avoiding the use of permanency words, introspectively challenge our perceptions, revisit stressful life events, check in on it, attack fear you notice that you have, vacations, shorter breaks in life with fun, read, write a moral code, list a moral code. Craig talked about that recently as part of the Unbeatable Mind program. Physical actions like yoga, martial arts. This is different from working out. Meditative martial arts. Make a change in life patterns. Do something different. Identify and practice identification with emotion in the moment, right now. We kind of spent a little bit of time on that with the first point. Develop rituals like the Tomb of the Unknown in my office. Hey, grab that for the cameras real quick if you would. I like to explain that one. I'll stop and pause and come back to you when you're back. Gratitude list. Aromatherapy. Listen to calming music or sounds. Play instruments or soothing sounds. So back to the Tomb of the Unknown. Rituals are important. So you can't do this on the audio version, but in the video on YouTube Live and Facebook Live, I'm holding up to the camera. Dr. El-Safi gave this to me. She's from Syria. I appreciate that, Dr. El-Safi, if you ever hear this. I use this a lot. It's very special to me. But you can see it's like a structure, right? that is kind of a, how would you even describe this? It's kind of cool. How would you describe this? I'm struggling
It's
right
like
now.
a jewelry box or something, or a little like, it's just a little like medicine box or jewelry box or just a little container.
Triangular shaped Syrian based architecture. Anyway, people come to my therapy office and they have thoughts and they might write the thought down, and we talk about how to use this strategy, and you write this thought down that's really hurting you, or that you're really struggling with, or that's really bothering you, or that you're really wondering about and you want to stop, or you want to get rid of this thought. You write it on a piece of paper and then look it. Right? You put it right in there. So the lid comes off and you put the piece of paper in there, and then it goes back on my shelf, and it literally creates a ritual where you leave it here in my office. People have told me how liberating. I mean, that sounds simple, right? How liberating that can be. It's a cool strategy. The tomb of the unknown. Develop the use of a mantra. Choose a positive focus point. Allow emotion to be seen by others. Vulnerability. Pray to a creator. Go to or attend a meeting of some kind. Read about the issue. Learn about it. Acupuncture. I'm not doing that one.
My wife's done it.
Ever. Really?
It's not that bad, she says. I mean, there's a lot about pressure points and stuff like that. They're very fine needles. It's not as bad as you think. You might be surprised. It might do some wonders for you.
That sounds scary as hell.
Are you
Always
are you okay with needles?
I mean, not really. It doesn't. I'll do it. I mean, I don't really like watching them give me a shot. So
I love watching, like when I give blood.
Do you really?
Oh yeah, I like. Yeah,
dude, that's creepy. You like watching them take blood?
Knowing it's gonna happen is more calming to me than like being like not knowing. So I'll watch it. And
you are a neurodivergent man.
Yeah, I've given enough blood in my life. It's just kind of cool to watch.
That's awesome. Everybody's different, right? Mm-hmm. Laugh with comedy in any way possible. Practice assertiveness and avoid passivity or aggression. Give something, maybe even knowledge to others. A broken record statement. Develop self-affirmations, medications rather. Gardening. Maintain a routine. A nice long bath. Psychotropic medications are appropriate. And then the very last one, I guess we do have 50 because that's not really numbered on the bottom.
Nope, it's not, but it is the 50th one.
By the way, go to therapy as a management tool, right? Mm-hmm. So what do you think about that list? I purposely go through it super fast because I want people to realize not what any one of these are. I want you to realize that there's a plethora of things. I mean, that's a long list, I feel like.
It's a long, diverse list. Because that's the thing, when you look at it and you go through that list, there's a lot of things that really goes through so many different things that you can do. Like for almost every personality in this world, even with this 50, which is even, I mean, you've talked about it. We'll probably be able to double this over the next year or two. Yeah. Because I think we're going to start gathering that information, and then, I mean, be comfortable knowing that if you do have issues and you need to manage it, there's something out here that's going to work for you.
And you know what I always like to say? This comes from very early on in my career, actually. When problems in life are really, really sticky, I mean, man, we get into some deep, tough spaces. Let's just say you're divorced and you feel like you're never going to find another partner and you're going to be alone for the rest of your life, and that really rides at you, it really nags at you, it really hits on you. You know what, when you're a math guy, I think a little bit, right? You're a science guy.
Yeah.
How many combinations with just the 50 that we have on there could we come up with if we did a combination of 3 strategies? What is that? 50 times 3 times something. I mean,
yeah,
it's a lot, right?
That's there's a lot of combinations when you break it down. Yeah, because you have 50, and then there's 49 options for the next one, and there's 49 more options, 48 for the next. Yeah, it can get pretty crazy.
So you're going to multiply 50 by 49 by 48 by 47 by 46.
Something like that.
So
yeah, there's formulas for it. I mean, you're probably looking at thousands of combinations if you're looking for 4 strategies, it even goes even further. But
right. So my point here is that when you're managing life stress and you're managing life issues, there are so many combinations of things that you can throw at it. So maybe when something's really dragging on over multiple months and you're struggling greatly, choose your go-to, use your go-to, the one that you've practiced, the one that you've honed, the one that you've learned about, as we talked about a little bit ago, and then add a different one that you maybe never even tried.
I mean, and the cool thing about this too is maybe it's one of those things, maybe it's not one thing that really gets you set. Maybe it is a series of 3 of them. Maybe you do some deep breathing into yoga and then you go do some gardening because you just love being out in nature. And that's the thing. It might take it where there's 3 things but once you go through that routine and you figure the system that works for you because you've tried it over and over again.
That's the point.
That's what you need to work through. So it's a great, I love the list and I love the idea of giving people options.
So when I'm speaking to a group, I'll have them call out a number. We just randomly go at a number. I don't want to do that this time. I gave you that list, Neil. I want you to look down through there and check one that looks curious to you that we can really kind of go into for just a moment to kind of demonstrate how do you really get into practicing this and managing things. Something that seems curious that you know a little bit about, but maybe not enough or you want to hear more about. Is one coming to you?
There was one that you said, I'm trying to remember which one it was, that was like a broken record statement.
Yeah, there you go.
That was one that's kind of like, because you talked about the mantra, but then you said broken record statement. So I'm intrigued by that one.
That's a perfect one. Honestly, I don't know. That very well be one that I created, right? I'm not sure about that. Sometimes I think I create something and somebody wrote a whole book on it, and I later find out that's a true story too. Early on in my career, the emotional bank account, that was a whole book that I thought I created an analogy for. So the broken record strategy is really cool in that you kind of set boundaries. So it's a part of boundary setting. And it can be very effective to avoid depthy conversations that are not needed. Repetitive, defensive, back and forth, maybe even aggressive postures people will take. And instead, you literally just say the same thing repetitively. Maybe over the course of a conversation, maybe over the course of a massive fight with your spouse, over a couple days or even a couple of weeks. This really maybe can be seen very effective in parenting. Right? How many times do we get into a back and forth BS conversation with our kid? You end up arguing. And you're the parent, you're the one that's in charge. And you end up trying to get sucked into these battles. Instead, back off and just simply say the same thing that you just said. You'd be amazed at what happens when that begins to occur. People don't know what to do with it, Neil. Right? They're anticipating a long conversation. And when you just repeat what you said, it's like, wow, you're not going any further with this. Is that what you mean? And then they might defensively go at something and bring up another point and argue and fight and tell you you're stupid. And you say for the 3rd or maybe the 4th time at this point, the same sentence. You're really drawing a line, a boundary, a point, and there's no reason to go much further than this.
Is that like because I said so? No.
Maybe not exactly that line. To go into a little bit more depth with this and how powerful it can be, when I'm working with a victim of domestic violence who's trying to manage the boundaries in their marriage, and it's dangerous and it gets pretty heavy, I will go through a broken record strategy and we'll have this conversation. We'll talk about it, probably even more in depth than we're going to today. And when they begin to do that, they begin to get out of their narcissistic spouse's way by just simply backing the conversation up, holding a boundary, but not being aggressive and going after, what could be really dangerous. I don't want to go to the grocery store. Okay, that's your sentence. You don't have to explain because I have a nail appointment, or because I'm tired, or because I didn't sleep very well last night, and because I'm exhausted, or because you never go to the grocery store, or any number of reasons that I defensively go at defending my position and arguing with you because you want me to go get potato chips for the game. Right?
No, I want potato chips.
Right? Sorry. Subconscious thinking, thought installation there. Potato chips with hockey tonight. That would be good, although I like peanuts. But I do digress. I'm not going to the grocery store. You can tell me all the things that you want to do. I'll sit here and patiently listen and watch with you, because I might even back off and try to shut the conversation down and go to a different room. And, in domestic violence, they'll come after you, man. And you just simply say the same sentence again. Really, baby, I don't want to go to the grocery store. That's all you need to say. And eventually, do you know what begins to happen? They begin to believe that sentence. And ultimately, you don't go to the grocery store. It's a powerful, powerful boundary setting tool, actually.
It makes a lot of sense, because if you just keep doing the statement, you don't have the emotional stuff or the next baggage or the justifications or you need to mow the yard. Blah, 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 blah. You need to mow the yard. Blah, 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 blah. You need to mow the yard. I'm not sure if you know, but my kids need to mow the yard.
Yeah, evidently.
But that makes sense, because it takes your emotions out of it. It's about the negative or the thing that you don't want to have happen. And you're, like you said, you're setting that boundary, which is great for management, because you're managing, saying, here's where I draw that line. And so I'm trying to think of so for this management of mental health for yourself. So the broken record statement is more about managing a situation with someone else more than it is about just you, right? Is that what you're basically saying?
Probably so, okay. Actually. Yeah, it's an interesting facet that I think I probably infer or assumed in my own thinking, but you're right. This is probably, because otherwise you're talking about a mantra, which say.
And that's why I want to try to go through this list and really elaborate on it, because I'm like, this would be a really great resource for these people with the presentation. Here's 50 things to do. Here's at least an intro about it, because but I think what's cool about having so many options, I guarantee that everyone's on the presentation, at least, like I said, has heard of at least 10 to 15.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's what's awesome. When I talk to a group, if I come talk to your agency or your group of CEOs, I will ask the question through this process. Give me 5 ways that you manage your mental health. I'm trying to think. I'm trying to think if I've ever had nobody be able to do that.
You don't have eat on here. Someone mentioned eating. You don't have eating on there.
Well, there is a qualifier that we're not talking about any of the self-destructive coping mechanisms.
I think cooking should be on here.
Well, nutrition. Yeah, I think nutrition is on there. Being mindful of nutrition
is on there.
Yeah,
but I think there's something about cooking, though. I love to cook.
Well, and what's interesting about this too, and I don't make this point strongly enough. I probably need to add to it. This is an ever-evolving presentation. Self-care is one of the things that people usually get to. And a lot of the times when I do ask that, somebody in the audience, help me, what are 5 things that you do to manage your mental health? They will do, well, I watch sports, I enjoy movies, I will take a walk, and they'll start to struggle, and they'll start to think, and I like gardening, and they may be able to say canoeing is something else that I do. But 4 of those 5 are self-care items, which is the cornerstone of mental health.
Yep.
So if you add self-care, I mean, hell, you can make a list of, knitting and pruning tree. I mean, you can go on and on and on with self-care items. So I limit that a little bit. Those are fun, relaxing, enjoyable activities. They're not self-destructive nor work-related tasks is the definition. Definitely you've heard me talk about that on this show before. But I want to really get at the non-self-care items.
Yeah. So now that we've executed a skill, or we've picked a skill, what's the next we have? Practice
it. So we totally did our little methodical management of mental health out of order because we talked about that intently before, right? So there's a lot of stress out there. There's a lot of points of struggle. And I think that we've made the point that we all have that challenge. We all have the worries and the fears and, the human emotional experience. So I hope that what's happened a little bit during this episode is getting your mind to wander a little bit. Just wander around and feel the empowerment, feel the energy that you can create for yourself, the hopefulness and the joy that you can really emotionally take care of yourself. I feel a lot of people fear that they can't. This is one of the reasons why people don't want to deal with the stress. They don't want to bring up issues because I can't handle it. I cannot handle my emotional truth. Now, whether you believe that or not, I'm going to submit to you that your thoughts to some extent betray you inside. You probably do, because I think we all do. So this is very uplifting. This is very hopeful. This is hopefully very empowering. This is very much encouraging that you can manage emotional issues in life, whether they're big or small, chronic, keep on coming back in your life, or it's a one-off type thing. How's that for a summary? Does that take us out of here fairly well?
I think so. I think people have to understand they're a lot more resilient than they think they are. And I think you said your emotions can betray you, I think, or your mental state can betray you as a very, very truthful reality.
Casey would be very proud and happy at the word resiliency. Internal, developed, purposefully resiliency. It's good stuff.
Very good.
All right, guys, take care. Thanks for hanging with us, and we will see you around the bend next week.